The wedding was supposed to start at 4 o'clock. Rosalie knew this because she had written it on every calendar in the house, on sticky notes above the kitchen sink, on the back of her hand in blue ballpoint pen that morning before her shift started. 4 o'clock. St. Michael's Church on Waverly. Her son Marcus was getting married at 4 o'clock. It was now 3:47, and she was still standing in the back room of Martindale's diner, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the ties of her apron. The lunch rush had bled into the afternoon. 2 servers calling in sick, tables full of customers who lingered over coffee and complaints. She'd picked up the double shift 3 weeks ago when the florist called about the deposit. That extra $400, that meant Marcus could have the gardenias his fiancée Bethany wanted. Gardenias for the church. Rosalie had never even smelled a gardenia until Bethany's mother had shown her pictures of the arrangements, that tight smile on her face, the unspoken question hanging in the air. "Are you sure you can manage your half?" She had managed. She always managed. 22 years of managing, since Marcus's father left them with a note on the kitchen table and $300 in the checking account. 22 years of double shifts and coupon clipping and making Christmas out of nothing. 22 years of watching her son grow into the kind of man who held doors open and called his mother every Sunday and fell in love with a woman whose family owned a lake house and used words like summer as a verb. Rosalie caught her reflection in the small bathroom mirror as she splashed water on her face. The fluorescent light was unforgiving. Her hair was pressed flat under the required hairnet, sweaty at the temples. The navy blue polo shirt with martingales stitched in yellow thread across the chest was stained with coffee near the hem, and something that looked like gravy on the sleeve. Her black work pants were wrinkled, her shoes the sensible, non-slip kind that squeaked on wet floors. She had a dress, a beautiful sage green dress that she'd found on sale at Macy's, tags still hanging in the back of her closet at home. She'd imagined wearing it today, imagined the look on Marcus's face when he saw her looking like a proper mother of the groom. She'd even bought low heels that matched, practicing walking in them around her living room at night after her shifts. The dress was 45 minutes away. The church was 12 minutes away. The ceremony started in 11. Rosalie made her choice. She pulled off the hairnet and ran her fingers through her flattened hair, trying to coax some life into it. She washed the flour from under her fingernails. She dabbed at the gravy stain with a wet paper towel, which only made it worse, spreading into a larger gray shadow. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let herself cry. She'd fix her mascara in the car. The highway was thick with Saturday traffic. Rosalie gripped the steering wheel of her old Honda, the one with the tape holding the side mirror on, the one she'd promised herself she'd replace once Marcus was through college, once the loans were paid, once the wedding was over. There was always a once, always a finish line that kept moving further away. 3:58. She was going to be late. She was going to walk into her only son's wedding wearing a Martindale's diner uniform, smelling like fryer grease and industrial dish soap, while Bethany's mother sat in the front pew in whatever elegant thing she'd probably had shipped from New York. A sob escaped her throat. Just one. She swallowed the rest. 4:07. Rosalie pulled into the church parking lot, tires crunching on gravel. She could see through the tall windows that people were already seated, the ceremony already started. White flowers everywhere, candlelight flickering, all those beautiful people in their beautiful clothes, turning toward the altar where her son stood, waiting for his bride. She should wait in the back, slip in quietly, find a seat in the last pew, hope nobody noticed. That was the proper thing to do. The invisible thing. The thing she'd been doing her whole life, working in the background so Marcus could stand in the light. But the back door was locked. Rosalie walked around to the front entrance, her squeaky shoes impossibly loud on the stone steps. The heavy wooden doors groaned as she pulled them open, and suddenly she was standing at the top of the aisle, the entire church spreading out before her, every head turning to see who had interrupted. The organ music faltered. Someone gasped. Rosalie saw Bethany's mother in the front row, saw her perfectly styled silver hair turn, saw her eyes widen and then narrow as they took in the uniform, the stained polo, the sensible shoes. Rosalie's face burned. Her feet felt rooted to the floor, legs refusing to move forward or back. This was a nightmare. This was worse than any nightmare because she couldn't wake up from it, couldn't rewind and make different choices, couldn't be the mother Marcus deserved on the most important day of his life. She opened her mouth to apologize, to say something, anything, but no words came out. And then Marcus moved. He stepped away from the altar, away from his groomsmen in their rented tuxedos, away from the priest with the open book. He walked down the aisle toward her with that same steady stride she'd watched him develop over 22 years, from his first wobbly steps across the kitchen floor to this moment, this walk that felt like it might save her life. Marcus. She finally found her voice, barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. I tried to make it. I had to work because the flowers. He reached her and took her hands. His eyes were bright with something she couldn't quite name, something that looked like pride and sorrow and love all tangled together. Mom. He spoke quietly, just for her. You're here. That's all that matters. I'm wearing my uniform. Rosalie's voice cracked. Everyone's looking. Your mother-in-law is about to learn something important about our family. Marcus squeezed her hands and turned toward the congregation, raising his voice so everyone could hear. He kept one hand wrapped around hers, anchoring her beside him. I need to say something before we continue. The church fell absolutely silent. Bethany stood at the altar in her white gown, her bouquet of gardenias trembling slightly in her hands. But she was smiling, Rosalie realized, smiling and nodding at Marcus like she already knew what he was going to say. This woman right here, Marcus continued, his voice steady and clear, has worked at Martindale's diner for 19 years. She started when I was 3 years old, right after my father left. She's worked doubles, triples, holidays, weekends. She's missed school plays and baseball games and parent-teacher conferences because she was covering someone else's shift so she could afford my cleats, my prom tickets, my college applications. Rosalie tugged at his hand. Marcus, please, you don't have to. But he wasn't finished. 6 months ago, when Bethany and I started planning this wedding, Mom insisted on paying for half. I told her no, but she did it anyway. He paused, his jaw tightening with emotion. Those flowers you're all looking at? The gardenias at the end of every pew? Mom picked up extra shifts to pay for those. She worked a double today, the day of my wedding, because 2 people called in sick, and she knew the deposit for the reception hall was coming due. A murmur rippled through the congregation. Rosalie saw Bethany's mother press a hand to her chest, her expression shifting from disapproval to something softer. So if anyone in this church has a problem with what my mother is wearing, Marcus's voice grew firmer now, they can leave. Because this uniform represents more love, more sacrifice, and more strength than any designer dress ever could. This uniform put me through school. This uniform kept a roof over our heads. This uniform is the reason I'm standing here today, about to marry the woman I love. He turned back to Rosalie, and now she could see the tears he'd been holding back, glistening at the edges of his eyes. I'm proud of you, Mom. I've always been proud of you, and I want everyone here to know exactly who raised me. Rosalie couldn't stop the tears now. They spilled down her cheeks, probably ruining what was left of her mascara, and she didn't care. She didn't care about the stain on her sleeve, or the flatness of her hair, or the way her shoes squeaked when she shifted her weight. Her son was looking at her like she was something precious, something valuable, something worth stopping his own wedding to honor. Bethany left the altar and walked toward them, her dress rustling softly against the stone floor. She reached for Rosalie's other hand, her eyes warm and certain. We saved you a seat in the front row. Bethany's voice was gentle. Right next to my mom. She'd love to hear about the diner if you're willing to tell her." Rosalie looked at the young woman who was about to become her daughter-in-law, this woman she'd been so intimidated by, so worried about impressing. Bethany was looking at her the same way Marcus did, like she saw her, like she was enough. "I might smell like coffee." Rosalie managed a wet laugh. Bethany grinned and leaned in close. Her whisper was conspiratorial. "I worked at a coffee shop through college. Best smell in the world." Marcus offered his arm, the same gesture Rosalie had seen grooms make in movies, that formal escorting of important women to their seats. She took it, her rough hand against his pressed sleeve, and let him walk her down the aisle she'd been too afraid to enter. The congregation watched them pass. Some faces were wet with tears, others were smiling, nodding, a few even reaching out to touch her arm as she went by. Bethany's mother stood as they approached the front pew, and Rosalie braced herself for the cold politeness she'd come to expect. But the older woman did something unexpected. She reached for Rosalie's hands, taking them in her own manicured fingers, and held them tight. "I had no idea." Her voice was thick. "The things you've done for your son, for this wedding. I'm ashamed I ever worried about," she glanced at the uniform, "about appearances." Rosalie didn't know what to say, so she just squeezed back. Marcus returned to the altar, Bethany floating up the aisle to meet him, and the ceremony continued. But everything felt different now. The gardenias smelled sweeter. The candlelight seemed warmer. And when the priest asked who gives this woman to be married, Rosalie's voice joined Bethany's father's, both of them answering together, claiming their rightful places in this new family being built. The reception afterward was everything Rosalie had helped pay for: the elegant hall, the catered dinner, the band playing songs she didn't recognize, but found herself swaying to anyway. She danced with Marcus during the mother-son dance, still in her uniform, still smelling faintly of the lunch rush, and she'd never felt more beautiful in her life. Bethany's mother found her near the dessert table later that night, pressing a piece of cake into her hands. "I want you to come to the lake house this summer. Both of us. We'll sit on the dock, and you'll tell me how you did it, how you raised a man like Marcus all on your own." Rosalie took a bite of cake, chocolate, her favorite, and she wondered if Marcus had told them, and felt something loosen in her chest, some knot she'd been carrying for 22 years finally beginning to unravel. "I just loved him. That's all. I just loved him the best I knew how." Bethany's mother nodded, her eyes understanding in a way Rosalie hadn't expected. "That's everything, isn't it? That's the whole thing." Later, after the bouquet was thrown and the getaway car was decorated with tin cans and streamers, Marcus found Rosalie standing alone on the venue's back patio, looking up at the stars. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, her boy turned into a married man in the space of an afternoon. "Thank you for coming." He leaned against the railing beside her. "I know it wasn't how you planned it." Rosalie thought about the sage green dress, still hanging in her closet, the matching heels she'd never worn. She thought about all the ways she'd imagined this day, all the ways she'd fallen short in her own mind. Then she thought about walking down that aisle on her son's arm, everyone watching, everyone finally seeing what she'd given and why. It was perfect. She meant it. Absolutely perfect. Marcus wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and they stood there together, mother and son, looking up at the same sky Shikawa used to show him constellations in when he was small, and the world felt impossible, and the only way forward was one shift at a time. The uniform was just fabric. The love inside it was the only thing that ever mattered. And now, everyone knew.